I'll introduce myself. I am Wallace, and I work in the product team at Capturing Reality, and we make photogrammetry software, RealityCapture, and RealityScan, which is the mobile app. It's working. So first, we're going to go through the principles of photogrammetry, because I think a lot of you probably understand the basic idea that you take a lot of photographs of an object and it will turn it into a 3D model. But often what happens is people take a lot of photos of an object and put it in the software and it doesn't turn into a 3D model. And that's often because they don't have a concept of how the software works. So hopefully in this talk, I'm going to give you some kind of insight into how it works. So when it doesn't work, you should have a better idea of why it didn't work. So core principles of photogrammetry. In the simplest terms, the process of scanning requires capturing many images of a subject from different angles for the purpose of digitally recreating the subject using software. So essentially, the last three there are the same thing, but we also take laser scans as inputs. With camera rigs, it's slightly different, because what you can do is you can take one shot, because a camera rig basically is a cage of cameras all pointing at the same thing. And what you can do is take one shot of a calibration object with lots of surface features. And that will give you a really good idea of the exact positions of all of the cameras there. And you can save those camera positions for future scans if you're scanning something which doesn't have lots of surface features. So there's a slight difference there. But a drone essentially just takes a load of photos as well. But also we'll have some good prior information sometimes of the positions of the cameras, because you get RTK drones which have far higher accuracy GPS than what you'd get on your mobile phone or whatever. So that can help the alignment as well. The three biggest considerations in scanning are image quality, which is like super important. You're not going to get a good scan if you have 500 pixels by 500 pixels, like really blurry, because it needs to find those surface features there. And overlap, because this is the main principle of photogrammetry, is that you have to see the stuff on the surface of the object from several different positions so that it can actually work out where that point is in three-dimensional space. Subject coverage, I think that's the most obvious one. If you haven't got any data of a part of an object, obviously it's not going to magically be recreated. Image quality. These images pretty much explain it. I'm probably going to repeat myself a lot about these surface features, because that really is the main concept which needs to be understood. Obviously this is going to mess up the surface features. If you have a blurry image, you can't see what's going on the surface. And noise obviously creates a problem, because the software is going to think that all those little specks of noise are also features, but they won't match, because the noise is going to be completely different from one image to the next. So that's like something you really want to avoid. Subject coverage. I think we just covered that. So you just need to make sure you don't just have one photo, but several photos of every single part of the object. Overlap. I'm just going to read this out. For the computer to relate two images together, it compares color information from one image with color information from another to determine how the images seem together. The computer continues folding the images in the set way until the subject is fully formed digitally. To provide the computer with enough information to complete this task, use 70% overlap. That's a good rule of thumb, but I mean, you can use 80%. I think it'd be a bit crazy to go to 90%. But this is often the case when a scan doesn't work, is people have got incredibly low overlap. When you get to like around 20% overlap, it's amazing. The software will sometimes figure it out and sometimes get it right. But that's where a lot of people fall down, is there's just not enough like images of those points to figure out what's going on there. So this is the general photogrammetry process. You have your scan data, which is a lot of images of your object. Then you put it into RealityCapture, and then we can export it as a 3D model with textures and sometimes a normal map and displacement map. Photogrammetry equipment. So obviously a camera can be anything. It could be a mobile phone or a camera on a drone. Lens, I guess if you're using your phone, then you don't need a lens, but you're going to get better. Pretty much the more you spend on your equipment, the better results you're going to get. So if you're using a DSLR, it's good to have like a nice lens on it. Tripod or monopod, we're going to go into a lot of detail about this later. Basically, you have a bit of trouble in photogrammetry because do you know what? I'm going to go into it later because it's on the slides. But basically, it means you can get a longer exposure if you use a tripod or monopod. You get more light in the camera. A ruler or scale bar, I've got one here. And this has like coded markers on it, which our software detects. So you can actually write a script which will find these markers in your scene and scale your scene accordingly. It knows if you tell it that these 2 dots are 25 centimeters apart, and then it can scale your whole scene. If you use 3 markers, you can orient the scene as well. You can orientate it. Color checker. Personally, I don't use it because I'm not that bothered about colors. But if you need your colors to be really precise, then this thing you can use in Lightroom and get a color profile to get your colors like really spot on. Lighting equipment. Yeah. Basically, you're going to end up with your lighting baked in. So we got a setup there with a ring flash, and that does a really good job of creating almost like a perfect like albedo with no shadows and stuff. But if you haven't got that and you're doing a big space, it's quite good to get it lit really evenly and nicely because everything that you see is going to be baked into your texture in the end. Polarization filters, again, we've got them on there. And that's really good because like I was saying earlier about the surface features, you can imagine on a shiny object, when you have a big reflection, those surface features change their appearance from one image to the next. So it can't match them up. Now, that cross-polarization setup, what happens is you've got your light coming out the flash. It goes through the first filter, and it's polarized horizontally. Now, the straight-up reflections, like off something shiny, will bounce back horizontally. And then we have a vertical polarized filter in front of the lens, so when the horizontal bits hit it, they don't go through. So the shininess is gone basically. So you can get rid of like all that shininess, which gives you a far better texture and gets rid of all those reflections. Drone, if you're scanning something big, you're going to need one because you need to get above it. Turntable, that's another way of scanning. Before I go past turntable, I think somebody was actually discussing this in the booth just now. One of the big problems with turntables is a lot of people don't realize that the background needs to be a void, essentially, because the software is going to calculate the relative position of the camera to that object. But if your background is stationary, it's also going to be looking at those tie points in the background. So you've got 2 different spaces going on at the same time. So you just have to make sure that background completely disappears. You could either edit it out in post, or if you use the cross-polarization and everything's black, it'll go completely to black. Batteries, very practical. Also memory cards. Can't even tell you how many times I've forgotten those. And scanning spray, that's another way of dealing with super shiny objects. There's this scanning spray you can get, and it evaporates after about 4 hours. But what you can do is you can scan your object without scanning spray, scan it with scanning spray, and if there's common features outside of your object, you can align it all together and only use the ones which don't use the scanning spray for your texture, and use the ones with the scanning spray for your mesh. So you can get the best of both worlds there. Because the scanning spray does an incredibly fine mesh. It's like even better than an object, which is very diffused. Okay, additional photogrammetry gear. That's all the same, that column on the left. Other things, smartphone can be pretty handy because you can mix and match, actually. I mean, we don't really recommend using mixed focal lengths, but you can use a huge variety. Obviously, often when you're doing drone, you'll have laser scans on the ground, and you'll also have like ground shots done with a DSLR. But a smartphone can be super handy, like if you're trying to get underneath something or something, because that thing is a bit of a pain to get like under, a small thing. So you could take some extra shots with a smartphone. Laptop is a super handy thing to have on site because you can, everything in photogrammetry revolves around the alignment. The alignment is figuring out where every single photo was taken from. And it's no good if you get back to your office and realize that nothing aligns. So it's great to have a laptop in the field so you can just run a quick alignment or a draft alignment. If you get a draft alignment, which is our sort of basic one, then you're going to get a really good normal alignment as well. So yeah, handy there. Software, RealityCapture, obviously. Spare batteries, power bank, everything else is here is very practical. Obviously, duct tape, if you're doing anything practical, that's good to have. A broom, I'm not too sure about the last two. I inherited this deck, so yeah. The culprit is here. If you're interested, we can ask him about the saw, especially. I've never taken a saw on a scanning trip. Guidelines for taking photos. Okay, so I'm just going to read this out, and then we'll go through them in detail, and then we'll recap afterwards because these are all like quite important. Do not limit the image count. Use the highest resolution possible. Do not lose focus. Each point should be visible in at least 2 images. Shoot a full loop around the object and also loops from several elevations. Do not change the viewpoint more than 30 degrees. Follow the shape of the object. Maintain high overlap between images. Do not shoot panoramic pictures. Avoid object movement, e.g. due to wind. Avoid transparent and shiny objects if possible. Avoid featureless textures. Keep constant lighting conditions. Okay, do not limit the image count. I just want to add to this because often people think they're going to get a better scan. If they're doing loops around an object, they'll be like, oh, it'll be better if I take a photo every 1 degree and get 360 in the loop. That's not what we mean by taking like more photos, because you'll barely see much difference than sticking to that 30-degree rule. So yes, take as many photos as you can, but stick to like roughly the 30. 20 is good, 10's easy. I actually shoot at every 10 degrees often. But what we really mean by this is just, if you even think for a moment that you might have missed a bit, just take a photo of it or several photos of it, because that is the worst if you get back to the office and realize you just completely didn't scan that thing. So just keep shooting. And the thing is if you've got too many photos, you can just take them out. You know, you can just not use them if you've got too many. So it's always better to just shoot as much as you possibly can. Use the highest resolution possible. We've got this in our help section, so you can actually see what kind of resolution you'll have on the model. So basically, here you've got quite a typical situation where you've got a full frame camera with a 35mm lens on it. It's quite low resolution, actually. But if you wanted 1 pixel per millimeter, that's how far away you should stand. But say if it was 50mm, obviously that distance would change to a little bit further away. But it's quite good if you know exactly what resolution you want. You can just use that calculator there. Okay, so it's quite good to be good at photography when you're doing photogrammetry. So this is definitely worth learning. I mean, essentially in photography, there's 3 things you need to understand, and that is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO setting. And this is the thing I was going to say, I'm going to talk in more depth about, because we tend to say use a small aperture because you want as much stuff in focus as possible, and that's how cameras work. The smaller the aperture, the more depth of field you have, which is like how much stuff comes in. But along with that comes the problem that you shoot something through a small hole, you're not getting much light in your camera, which means often you need to make some kind of compromise. And that compromise often comes with its own problems. So for instance, you can get more light in the camera by leaving the shutter open longer. But if you leave the shutter open longer in your handheld, you get a motion blur. You can get more EV value by cranking up your ISO, which is the sensitivity of the camera, but that comes with noise. So often you're having to do this juggling act in your head of working out what is the most appropriate setting to change in my specific situation. But the other way you can counterbalance all of this is by having a lot of light, hence really powerful flash, or you just light your room like really bright. Then you can have the works. So you can have a fast shutter speed, you can have a small aperture, and you can have a nice low ISO, so you have a low noise image. But yeah, basically you have to get good at photography to understand where you're going to make your compromises. For instance, if I was in a dark room and I was looking at the walls and I know they got lots and lots of surface features, I'd probably crank the ISO up because I know that those surface features are going to overpower the noise in that image. Or you can get a tripod and then you can have a long shutter speed. I mean, that's your other option. That's a really good option, but obviously it takes a long time to scan if you're having to do long shutter speed and move a tripod between every single image. Okay, each point should be visible in at least 2 images. We discussed this earlier. This is how it works. I mean, that is the principle of photogrammetry, is that it finds these features in several images and then works out their exact positions in 3-dimensional space. Oh, excuse me. Okay, shoot a full loop around the object and also loops from several elevations. So a lot of people get the bit when they're doing a loop that it needs to be every 30 degrees, or I like to do every 10 degrees. But often, then they'll raise up to above more than 30 degrees. And then, I mean, if you think about shooting something from that angle and at 90 degrees, there's no way of matching those features. They've completely distorted to something different. So the software hasn't got a chance of matching them to create, to figure out where those points are in 3-dimensional space. So as you raise your loops, make sure you don't raise your loop up by 30 degrees on that angle there. There we go. I'm not even going to do this slide because I think I just explained that. Follow the shape of the object. I mean, it's good to be roughly the same distance away. So you want to, you want to stay perpendicular to the object, but also to get that parallax. Oh no, our founder's Martin's here, so I'm going to say this because I know he's going to tell me this is wrong otherwise. What you really should be doing, if you've got a flat surface, is shoot a stereo pair, because then it's actually going to help with undistorting and stuff. I wouldn't have said that if Martin wasn't here, because it's slightly more advanced. But yeah, just to keep Martin happy. Next one, maintain high overlap between images. Again, I know I'm banging this point home, but last time I did a talk like this, we did a bit of photogrammetry afterwards, and loads of people were not maintaining a high overlap between images. So I'm just going to keep repeating it. I'll probably say it again. Yeah, 70% is a good sort of target. But yeah, as I explained earlier, you want to do up, down, left, and right. And also when you zoom, you want like 70% of it to be the same. Because sometimes, like I said in the previous slide, to keep the same distance away from the object, it also can be useful to take another set of images a little bit further away, because that will really help the alignment to tie it together. But also you want 70% overlap as you go a little bit further away. Often you will disable those images in meshing because it's just to tie the whole thing together in the alignment. Okay, now this is a very common mistake, and lots of people do this. So if you have one takeaway from today, it's just don't do this, because essentially you get no 3D information into the software if you stand there and just tilt your camera. It works by moving the camera, so always move the camera a little bit. Just in any situation, you can see. We actually used to have a slide where you could see the difference in quality of mesh, but basically from a pivoted position, yeah, it will work, but you get a horrible mesh. A lot of the things I'm saying today, you might be thinking, hey, I've done this before and I didn't do what he's saying and it worked. But if you do what I'm saying, you'll get a better result, like significantly better. It will work, but the software will take anything. But you can make it a lot better by following all of these rules that I'm saying. Avoid featureless textures. Yeah, I mean, again, same principle. It's not a particularly good example because this orange actually does have some quite good features on it. But if it was a white wall, I mean, white walls don't scan very well, essentially. It's a very difficult thing to scan. Okay, maintain consistent flat lighting. Like I was saying, again, this setup will create almost a perfect sort of albedo texture. There's no shadows because the light is entirely around the lens. Or I mean, if you can, just try and set up a complete ambient lighting setup by putting softboxes all over the place. But if you're shooting outside, try not to shoot on a sunny day because those really harsh shadows are going to get baked into everything. Overcast weather is ideal for photogrammetry. Avoid transparent and shiny objects if possible. For all of the reasons I was saying earlier, they don't really have surface features and they have reflections as well because obviously you're seeing right through it. This is one way you can actually deal with that. Because obviously if you've got a transparent object, you don't really want to be using a diffuse texture. You just want to create a transparent material. So you just spray it with stuff because all you're interested in that situation is the geometry. So in this situation, it's been sprayed white and then black speckles have been flicked on with a toothbrush or something. And you can see you get a really, really nice mesh of the object there, which you could just add a transparent material to. Okay, so I'm going to read this again. Sorry if you're getting bored. But yeah, do not limit the image count. Use the highest resolution possible. Do not lose focus. Each point should be visible in at least 2 images. Shoot a full loop around the object and also loop at several elevations. Do not change the viewpoint more than 30 degrees. Follow the shape of the object. Maintain high overlap between images. Do not shoot panoramic images. Avoid object movement. Avoid transparent and shiny objects where possible. Avoid featureless textures. Keep constant lighting conditions. Okay, do's and don'ts to remember. Use the camera with the highest resolution available. Use high quality images. Use tripod, gimbal, or other camera lens accessories. Yeah, I was talking about that earlier, so I'll just expand a bit. When we looked at the EV triangle, that was one of the ways we can get more light into the camera is basically extending that shutter speed, and tripod is an excellent way of doing that. You can shoot up to like 5 seconds. I think it gets a bit noisy after that. So you can shoot in really dark places by using a tripod. Keep the object lighting consistent. Yeah, I mean, that's another problem people often have with the turntable setups is they'll put a lights at 90 degrees to the turntable. But you can imagine as it turns round, the relative positions of those lights is essentially the same as swinging it round the object. So that is the best setup for a turntable. You want either a ring flash or 2 flashes either side of the camera so the lighting will remain consistent throughout the turntable thing. But definitely don't light from the back, don't light from the sides when you're using a turntable. But if you're not using a turntable, it will just keep whatever lighting you have. I completely lost where I've got to. Oh yes, set your exposure triangle correctly. Yeah, we've gone into that in detail. Try to achieve 80%. Well, there we go. We've got 70 and 80%, but yeah, 80% is obviously better. The object of interest should cover 60% or more of the image frame. Okay, that's another really important one. A lot of people will shoot, something which is like spindly or whatever, and like essentially what you're aligning is the stuff in the background. So you really want to get close enough with your camera so that it just takes up a lot of the frame because that is the object you're scanning. Otherwise, it's trying to align something completely different. Each point of the scanned object should be visible in at least 2 images. I think, yeah, we've gone through that. Stop down your aperture, again, for the large depth of field, and shoot raw if you want to get the best quality. We'll go into that in a second. Don't limit your image count. Don't lose focus. Avoid capturing photos with motion blur, bokeh. Bokeh is when you open up the aperture really wide to let loads of light in and you get a short depth of field and everything is blurry. So that will end up on your texture. If there's blurry parts of any image on your photos of the object you're taking, then that blur is going to end up being projected onto your object as well. Avoid object movement. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one because if you're trying to align and it's not in the same place from one image to the next, then you're going to end up with a big mess. Avoid transparent and reflective objects. Don't avoid featureless textures. Again, you can use scanning spray or whatever. Don't understort your images. Yeah, let RealityCapture create your understort. Some people will go into Lightroom and be like, oh, wow, I've got a preset for my lens here. You know, I'll understort it. But it's a lot better if the software does it itself. Don't crop your images. Yeah, again, I think the only exception to that, I'd say, is if we don't recommend using fisheyes, but if you did, then maybe a small central crop wouldn't be such a bad idea. But I would just say just avoid fisheye lenses. But yeah, as a rule, yes, do not crop images. All data is good. Don't oversample your images using don't use any AI stuff, because it will actually slightly shift or contort or distort those tiny little surface details. So it can also make a mess of the alignment. But you could, if you wanted to use an AI denoiser, use that on a texture layer, so that it would only be projected onto the texture, but it will mess up the alignment and meshing. Okay, additional camera settings. Yeah, shooting in RAW. I mean, it can be useful. I mean, a lot of RAWs are like 14 bits, so after processing, you can pull a bit of information out of the shadows and highlights to find some extra features in there. Don't delete the EXIF data. So this can help the alignment, because we can know the focal length with respect to 35mm. So basically, the more information that goes into the alignment, so it knows what kind of images it's dealing with, the better. I mean, it needs like a nice sort of starting point. Choice of lens. Yeah, you can use any lens, but generally we use primes. We've got 3 different primes for that. I think the sweet spot's about 35mm. That's a 35mm on there. But you can go up to 50mm. I wouldn't go too long, to like 100mm or something like that. If anybody's not a photographer, I'm probably talking nonsense here, but essentially 24mm would be about that wide. 50mm roughly what your eyes see, and then 100mm like moving towards sort of telephoto, but not as telephoto as like a sports lens or something like that. But yeah, I'd say between 35 and 50 is a nice lens thing. And yeah, again, primes will get you like sharper images than zoom lenses. Dynamic range, similar to what I was saying about using RAWs, is like you want as much information in the shadows and highlights, because sometimes you can't control the weather and you have to shoot on a sunny day and you've got blown out highlights and shadows. So yeah, nice to have some dynamic range so you can actually pull some information out of those parts of the image. Okay, yeah, the histogram. So you can see we got under correctly exposed and overexposed there, and you can see the shadows on the underexposed thing. There's no way the software can magically work with something which is completely black. It needs to find features. And similarly, with the overexposed thing, you can see some of those parts are completely blown out highlights. So there is no data in there either. Depth of field, like we were talking about earlier, with stopping it down. I think I shot these in my garden just the other day. That one at the bottom is shot at f16, and the one at the top, I think, was shot at f2. But in actual fact, in this situation, you probably would get quite a nice model of those rocks. But all data is good data, like I was saying earlier, and all of that stuff in the background could be used in the alignment in the one with the longer depth of field. Okay, post-processing images. After scanning a subject, the scanned images typically undergo quality review. Yeah, throw out any blurry ones. Anything which just looks rubbish, or you pointed up in the air, or you got some horrible motion blur, just throw it in the bin, because there's no point trying to make the software try and think about trying to include those images which have just got garbage data. In fact, your worst case scenario would be that it did align them and gives you a horrible mesh and a horrible texture. The remaining photos are post-processed, equalized and cleaned up as best as possible before being sent to RealityCapture. Okay, yeah, tools like Lightroom, yeah, it's pretty handy because you can basically, a lot of your images are going to look very similar and need similar processing. So you can just pull out one image, set a curve or whatever to expose it how you want to get those info out the shadows and highlights, and then it will just do, you can get it to just do the same thing on your entire data set. And data sets can be sort of like 20,000 images, so you really want to be automating that process and not doing them one by one. Yeah, color checker I've got here, and yeah, that will, like I said earlier, that's going to get your colors right. There's a typical curve which will pull out the shadows and highlights, just boost them up a little bit. Yeah, like I was saying earlier about the AI stuff, be cautious using sharpening filters because it will mess it up. You can do a tiny bit of sharpening, but yeah, don't overdo it because pixels move around the place sometimes. Okay, alignment process. Yeah, this is basically just figuring out where all of the cameras are. Where have we got? Automatic registrations of different inputs, photos or laser scans. Yeah, so we can actually align laser scans to photos, which gives you the best of both worlds because the laser scan, in most situations, is going to give you a better mesh than you will get from simply your photos, but it will give you a horrible texture. Even the extremely expensive laser scanners have really nasty like RGB. So once you've aligned it with your photos, that's the best of both worlds. You just switch off the meshing on your photos once they're all aligned into the right position. Just mesh with your laser scans, then switch off texturing on your laser scans and only mesh with your photos. And then you get beautiful mesh, beautiful texture. Reuse of camera, that's what I was talking about earlier with the rigs and using the XMPs. Depending on your rig, we have 3 different ways of saving those XMPs. Draft basically is a starting point, and then it'll just shift the cameras around a little bit after it's got the draft XMP. But you can also set them to locked, so literally those cameras will always stay in exactly the same position from in the alignment, and it'll just look for the tie points in there. Reconstruction, yeah, then that's the second stage. This one uses your GPU and takes the longest period of time. If you have thousands of photos, it's it can take up to days, and yeah, and then mesh editing tools. So the thing with photogrammetry is you often end up with absolutely gigantic meshes which have no sort of practical use for probably most industries. I mean, sometimes up to like 5 billion triangles. So yeah, what you do then, we have decimation built into the software so you can simplify and put it down to whatever size you need. But the good thing about having that original like huge mesh of millions and millions of triangles is we can actually bake a normal map from the really high detailed model to whatever model that you've simplified it to. Okay, and yeah, and we have tools for checking and repairing the model topology and cleaning it up and closing holes. Okay, so yeah, this is basically how it works. Once you've got your model, we have a lasso tool, so you can select triangles and delete them. Yeah, and you can smooth, simplify, then check topology and clean the model, so you get a nice model by the end of it. Texturing and coloring. Okay, yeah, we can calculate vertex colors and textures. And yeah, we have an unwrapping tool, so you can set it to whatever you like. You can actually, we have a mode called fixed texel size, where basically it will create an unwrap and create as many textures as it needs to use the full quality from all of those images. You can't actually see it in the viewport because it has a limit of 116K image, but when you export the model or make a render, you can see the proper quality of your texture. Calculating textures in U1V1 or UDIM format. We're going to do a bit of that later. I'm going to export a model. Hopefully I'll have time. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, you can bake a normal or displacement map from your super high resolution model to your low poly. Okay, export options. I think we cover most of the normal normal model types, and also you can export orthographic projections. Fly through videos, we have like a little thing where you can keyframe a camera and create a video. And yeah, you can export the XMPs like I was saying earlier. Okay, right, ready for doing some scanning. So I'm just going to show you how to scan this jug live, and it should actually be able to get a feed onto the screen here. Okay. Right, I'll stick that there. So just wanted to show you in practice. How are we doing for time, Zoe? Sorry? Okay, cool. Okay, so you can see there. So essentially, I mean, the workflow I'm about to show you, I'm actually going to use some images I did earlier, so I don't have to do the image transfer. But we can make masks in the app. So we can actually get this full bottle. I hope it doesn't fall over. By scanning it one way up and then the other way up. But I'll show you the workflow in a second. So go. I'm afraid it's not showing you the results, but I just wanted to show you like roughly sort of like how far around you move every time. I'm just trying to get as much of it as in frame as possible. But you know what? You don't actually have to get the whole object in frame in every shot. You can just get like a small part of it, because obviously you're scanning like a castle or a huge landscape. That's not even an option. I could take photos like that. But this lighting you're seeing now would not be on these photos. You'll see in the examples later. So here we go. Okay, and then like after you finish that, then you'll go up to that level there. I mean, that's got to be less than 30 degrees. And then do another full loop around. And then sometimes I'll either carry on and do a further loop there, but sometimes like what can be a good technique is you may have to just make sure that everything's tied together, is you can just do a sort of crisscross over the top. So I could go like over that way, then over that way, but so long as it all ties together. And then essentially I would do the exact same process upside down, and then make sure that I get this bit, because that's the bit that's missing, essentially. Okay. I think it'll do for that. Okay, so that camera actually takes incredibly high resolution images. They're like 9,000 pixels across. So I've actually downscaled them to 6,000 across, just because otherwise it just takes too long to process. So here is the original images. I actually shot these outside. And there you can see that it's actually, oh, no, you can't see because I got it on the wrong screen. You can see that the lighting isn't baked in there. The ring flash has got it nice and diffused. But also it will average when it does the texturing, it will average from every single photo. So obviously when I took it from above, that face there is better exposed. So when it averages it all out, you do get a nice diffuse. So what I'll do is I'm going to open up RealityCapture, and we will dump in the side one there, just by dragging and dropping. And first thing you always do pretty much is go to the alignment tab and click align. And because I've downscaled them, and this is a beast of a computer, it does it incredibly quickly. So there you go. Now those little dots are the tie points. So that's where it found matches on the surface. And essentially, I'm not going to do it now, but I'll show you the process. This is the reconstruction region here. And you can pull these little handles or rotate it or make it whatever size you want. And it will reconstruct that. And I'm going to do a quick preview model where the preview model is not like a proper full-on mesh. To do a really nice detailed mesh, you click normal mesh or high mesh, but the preview one pretty much just joins up the dots in the sparse point cloud, which is that point cloud you can see right there. But because this camera is so nice, it actually is pretty good even on the thing. But actually, this is not my project. I've made this project purely to create masks. So I've just lifted up the reconstruction region there. And then I go to C3D, Tools, And then we have this feature here, cut by box, and I can click cut outer. And now, essentially, we can use this model here to create masks. And basically, it's going to make a mask where it only allows data through from where the model is. And it will completely black out everything behind. So otherwise, when you turn the thing upside down, it's going to get confused because it's going to see all the tie points in that feature there. So it's effectively as if you've like masked the whole thing. And that is in mesh model, export, depth, and mask. I'm not going to do it. Oh, well, why not? Let's just do it. Play job downscaled, side 1. Yeah, select there. And yeah, you don't want the camera depths. So I've got the depths turned off. And I think it should do it pretty quickly. In fact, we can go to the folder and have a look. There, you can see those masks being created there. Right, so I'll just show you my folder that I made earlier where I did this. Basically, after you've done that, you can just kill that project, and then you basically do the exact same thing. Where are we? Desktop. Side 2, you can just do the exact same thing. I'll just show you the images there. There's the upside down ones. And you do the identical process there. So after that's done, let's just make a new project there. There I have this with masks there. You can just dump in both sides. And if I click on the image there and press tab, you can see there's the mask. But I already actually have a project where it's all aligned. And where's my 3D model? Let's just reset the view there. There we go. And there's a 3D model, and that's done it in normal detail, and you can see it also has the bottom, but that is the solid view. If I turn to Suite, you can see that is the model with the textures. Let me just see. Oh, yeah, I can stick in that mode there. Okay, so let's just briefly go into the tools that I was telling you about earlier. You can see here I've made a low poly version. That one's only 500 triangles. I've made a medium one, which is like 10,000. But I'll just quickly show you the simplification tool because it has baking like built into it. So it's in I've got my high detail model here, which is 3.4 million triangles, which is not much use to anybody. And I've created 9 2K textures. Now, the reason I've done that, I know that's weird, is because I wanted to show you UDIMs. So what you need to imagine is this software can be used to scan entire cities. So you can end up with hundreds of 8K textures. I mean, if you're going to Unreal, you probably want to keep them at 4K. So I just wanted to show you the UDIM workflow. So this jug wasn't going to take hundreds of 4K textures, so I made it 2K. So I'll just show you the simplification tool here. And there you go. You have you can basically give it a target triangle count. So currently it's set to 1 million. And then also you have these options here for color reprojection and normal reprojection. So if I go back to my low poly, so I just hit simplify there, I would get, well, I could stick that to enable. I would get a 1 million triangle object with a diffuse and a normal map. But let's just have a look at my low poly here. You can see it's got 2 textures. It's got the color there. And if I just click on that, you've got the normal map. Now that is baked from this 3.4 million triangle. So you can see it's actually got like all the little tiny scratches and stuff on it there. You also have the option if you use the texture reprojection tool, which is essentially what the simplified tool was doing there, is reprojecting the textures. yeah, you also have the option to have a displacement map as well. So you can do that afterwards as well, just like add a displacement map. Okay, let's say I wanted to export. I have my models ready to show you into Unreal, but let's say I wanted to do the normal detail model with UDIMs. We can go to Mesh Model, Export Dense Mesh Model, and save it. That's actually low poly. Here's the UDIM one. Replace it. Okay, so when you're doing the UDIMs, select No for material and set it to UDIM, and use this transformation preset with Unreal in it. Okay, I'm not going to click OK just in case I got something wrong, and I know that I've got models which will work, so I'm going to use them. But that's essentially what I did. So we can go into Unreal there, and there's the UDIM model, and import it. And where did I put it? Oh no, desktop. Wallace's stuff, clay jug, models, UDIM model. Okay, so when you're doing UDIMs, you just need the FBX. We don't have a normal map because this is the high poly one, so obviously there's no point baking a normal map onto it. And you only need your 1001. You don't need to import the others. I'll show you a setting that you actually have to set in Unreal before doing this. Okay, so I am going to build Nanite, and check this convert scene unit thing, because RealityCapture is in meters and Unreal is in centimeters, so you'll end up with a really tiny jug if you don't check that there. Okay, that's importing now. I don't know if I can show you the setting whilst it's importing. Maybe we can have one question whilst that's importing. No, it shouldn't take too long.
We are out of time for questions for this session, but Wallace is going to be available at the demo kiosks right outside the doors here afterwards and into lunch. So please feel free to follow up directly.
Oh, okay. We don't have time for Q&A. Oh, okay. Yeah, just come and grab me if you have any questions. I'll be around the booth for a while. So yeah, once you've imported your model, you can see we selected no material there. So you need to make a material. Let's just call it blah, blah, blah. And now, I just wanted to show you quickly that you can see it says VT there, and it's actually loaded in all of those other 1002, 1003, etc. But to make sure it imports properly, you need to enable virtual textures, which is, there you can see it's checked, enable virtual texture support. So that needs doing before, and, no, cancel. I got rid of my... what am I doing? I'm closing Unreal Engine. Where's the... I'll just get rid of the settings there. Okay, so let's make this material. So we will drag in our UDIMs there, plug them into the base color, and then you don't want it shiny because it's a jug and it's not that shiny. So we'll just make a constant let's make that 9.8 or something, so it's really rough, because it is really rough. And then apply that, and and then we'll open our jug and stick that material onto it. And there is our jug, which we can just drag into the scene here. Okay, let's press F. And there you go. But obviously, you wouldn't do that with a jug. I don't know if we've got time to show the low poly thing, but essentially I've imported that as if it was a massive landscape or a castle or something, because this is detailed enough to have ants crawling around on or whatever. It could be a level in itself. I don't know if we've got time for my low poly one, but the low poly workflow is a lot easier. You basically do the same thing. You don't use UDIMs, and you probably wouldn't build Nanite either, because it's so small. So that's the difference between importing an environment or importing like a small object to use in like a game or whatever. Should we wrap things up? Okay, thanks guys.